Brianna Taylor's heels clicked against the wet sidewalk, rain plastering her hair to her neck, heart hammering in her chest. Her ex had followed her again. She knew his obsession, his temper, and this time, she couldn't let him corner her. She spun into a dim cafe doorway, desperate, scanning for anyone who could be her shield. A table by the corner was empty, except for a man absorbed in a leather-bound notebook. In one impulsive, reckless motion, she leapt, sliding onto his lap as if it were a life raft. The stranger's pen stopped mid-sentence. His eyes, calm and piercing, met hers. Shock flickered across his face, and then something else. A protective certainty. Brianna had no idea she had just sat in the lap of a millionaire who wouldn't let a single hair on her head be harmed. "Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin." The cafe's bell chimed as Brianna tried to catch her breath, the warmth and smell of coffee wrapping around her like a fragile cocoon. She pressed herself against the stranger's chest, aware of the absurdity. She had literally jumped into a man's lap to escape her ex, but the panic still gripped her throat. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, steady, with just enough edge to command attention. Yes, she stammered, though her trembling fingers betrayed her. "I just needed to hide." His gaze flicked toward the door, attentive but unhurried, scanning as though he could sense the threat even before seeing it. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't call anyone. He just watched, his expression unreadable. Brianna realized, with a jolt, that she felt safe. Her ex, Michael, had been obsessed ever since their breakup 6 months ago. At first, it was subtle. Texts at odd hours, appearing at her workplace, by coincidence. Questions that sounded like concern but had the sting of control. Brianna had shrugged it off, convinced she could handle him. Until last night. Until the threats. Until the muggy heat of summer nights where Michael's car would idle outside her apartment, waiting. And now, in the middle of a torrential downpour, she had run. No, fled, right into the lap of a stranger. She paused, embarrassed, finally disentangling herself. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Relax," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though his eyes remained sharp. "You're safe now. For however long you need." Something about the way he said it made her heartbeat slow just slightly. There was no judgment, no irritation, just assurance. And maybe, Brianna realized, that was exactly what she needed. She slid off his lap, standing awkwardly in the narrow space, brushing wet hair from her face. He studied her for a moment, the corner of his mouth lifting as if he understood everything without needing explanation. "I'm Luke," he said finally, extending a hand. "Brianna." Her fingers met his briefly. Strong. Warm. Certain. There was a tension in the air, electric, complicated, and yet somehow comforting. It wasn't lust, at least, not yet, but a spark. A spark of recognition that something about this man was different. Before she could respond, the door banged open. Rain slashed against the windows. A dark figure entered, scanning the cafe like a predator. Michael. Brianna froze. Her ex had spotted her. He was a large man, towering, face twisted in frustration. "Brianna," he barked. Every head turned. Brianna's chest tightened. Luke stepped in front of her before she could react. Not aggressively, but firmly, and with a calm certainty that made Michael pause mid-step. "Excuse me," Luke said, voice cold but controlled. "You need to leave." Michael laughed, the kind of humor that came with arrogance and entitlement. "And who are you to tell me that?" Luke's eyes didn't waver. "Someone who doesn't like threats in his cafe." The words were simple, yet delivered with a calm dominance that made Michael hesitate. Brianna could see the unspoken warning, "Leave or deal with me." Her heart was racing. Who was this man? He looked ordinary. Except he wasn't. There was something in the way he held himself, the subtle confidence, the quiet power. She would have noticed it if not for the panic still coursing through her veins. Michael glared, sensing the challenge, and muttered something under his breath. He finally strode past the counter, his eyes locked on her, and stormed out into the rain. Brianna's legs nearly gave out. She sank back into the chair Luke had pulled out for her. You could have gotten hurt, she whispered. Luke shrugged lightly. You wouldn't have let that happen. Her brows furrowed. What? You wouldn't have let him touch you. His voice was calm, but Brianna noticed the edge of intensity. Protective, possessive, without a hint of entitlement. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure why, but every instinct in her body whispered that he was someone who could, and would, keep her safe. I didn't know what else to do, she admitted, voice barely audible. I didn't even think. Luke leaned back, studying her, as if weighing every nuance. You were brave. Brianna laughed nervously. Brave? I literally jumped onto a stranger's lap. Luke's smile widened, a glimmer of amusement flickering across his face. Sometimes the brave ones do the unexpected. She felt heat creep up her neck. The words weren't flirtatious, not really, but there was a weight to them, an acknowledgement of her fear and her impulsiveness. As the storm outside continued to hammer the city, Brianna realized she didn't want to leave. Not because she was stuck in the cafe, but because something about this man made the world feel manageable, safe. A rare luxury she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Do you want coffee? Luke asked, tilting his head slightly. Brianna hesitated. I guess so. Good. Black, or are you one of those people who ruin coffee with milk and sugar? She blinked at him, surprised by the casual tone. Despite the danger, the chaos, and the adrenaline still thumping in her veins, she found herself smiling. Black. Strong. He nodded approvingly, standing and moving to the counter. She watched him. Everything about him was precise, deliberate. His suit, black, tailored, wasn't flashy, but it suggested someone used to control. Control of himself, his surroundings, and, perhaps, others. The coffee arrived. He set it in front of her, careful, attentive. She took a sip, grateful, and the warmth of the cup grounded her. You owe me the story, he said, settling into the chair across from her. Why were you running? Her lips pressed together. She had told no one, not friends, not family, how dangerous Michael had become. But Luke's eyes didn't judge. They only asked. Invited honesty. She paused, collecting herself. He's my ex. Dangerous. I didn't think he'd come after me tonight, but he did. Luke nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Do you want me to help? Brianna blinked. His offer wasn't haughty. It wasn't invasive. It was genuine. But she hesitated. Help was complicated. Pride was complicated. And yet, she didn't want to refuse. Yes, she admitted finally, voice low but firm. I need help. Luke's gaze softened. Good. Because you're not facing this alone anymore. Her heart raced again, but this time not from fear. From relief. From the realization that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could be her anchor. And in that moment, sitting across from him as rain continued to lash the windows, Brianna had no idea that the man in front of her wasn't just a stranger with calm confidence. He was a millionaire, a protector, and perhaps the beginning of something she hadn't expected at all. The storm outside raged, but inside, in the warmth of that small cafe, a different kind of storm was brewing. A storm of attraction, trust, and the unspoken promise that some risks were worth taking. And Brianna was about to discover just how life-changing a leap onto a stranger's lap could be. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Brianna stepped out of the cafe, Luke walking beside her with the casual ease of someone who owned the street, or at least felt he did. She couldn't help but notice how his presence seemed to absorb attention without even trying. People gave him polite nods as they passed, and even the city lights reflected differently against him, as if he belonged to some world she hadn't yet glimpsed. Brianna kept her umbrella angled just so, trying not to let the droplets wet her hair again, but Luke seemed unbothered by the rain. He tilted his head back slightly, letting a few drops land on his dark hair and suit. She found herself smiling at the contrast, reckless abandon versus meticulous caution. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "most people wouldn't just jump into a stranger's lap." She snorted, embarrassed. "Yeah, most people also don't have an ex who thinks stalking is a hobby." He raised an eyebrow. "Your ex sounds persistent." "Persistent?" She groaned. "Obsessive. Dangerous. I tried everything to keep him away." She hesitated, realizing she was speaking more openly than she usually would with a stranger. But there was something about Luke that made honesty feel safe. "Restraining orders, moving apartments, changing my schedule. Nothing works. Tonight, I just panicked." Luke nodded thoughtfully. "I understand panic." His voice was calm, but Brianna caught a flicker of intensity in his eyes. "And you acted on instinct. That's not weakness. That's survival." The words settled over her like a bomb. For months, she had felt weak, trapped, and alone. And yet here was a man who saw her not as fragile, but as capable, despite the fact that she had literally landed on his lap. They walked in near silence for a few minutes, the city streets glistening under the wet pavement. Brianna couldn't help but notice subtle things: the way Luke's steps were measured, the quiet confidence in his posture, and the faint smell of something clean and masculine that lingered around him. She flushed slightly and looked away. "So," Luke said casually, as if discussing the weather, "where are you staying tonight?" Brianna blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if your ex is tracking you, you shouldn't go home. He knows where you live." Her stomach tightened. I guess I'll figure something out." "You won't," he said simply. "I can get you somewhere safe." Her immediate response was skepticism. I can't impose on you. You don't even know me." Luke glanced at her, one corner of his mouth tilting up in amusement. "Trust me, you're not imposing. Besides, I'm already invested." "Invested?" she asked, unsure whether to be alarmed or flattered. "In your safety," he said, eyes meeting hers directly. There was no arrogance, no theatrics, just an unwavering certainty that made her chest tighten. "You jumped into my lap. That's a dramatic move. I want to make sure it doesn't get you hurt." She swallowed. The words had weight. They weren't flirtation, they were commitment. Brianna had never been one to rely on anyone. Her independence was her armor, forged from years of building a career, paying her own bills, and proving to herself that she didn't need anyone. And yet, she wanted to lean on him. She wanted, desperately, to let herself trust. "Okay," she said finally, her voice trembling just slightly. "I'll accept your help." Luke's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Good choice." They arrived at a sleek, modern car waiting at the curb. It was black, understated, but commanding, a vehicle that seemed to announce power without shouting. Luke opened the door for her, and she hesitated only for a second before sliding inside. "Seatbelt," he instructed, and she did as told, noting the calm efficiency in his voice. "Where are we going?" she asked cautiously. "Somewhere you can breathe without looking over your shoulder every 5 seconds, he replied. The corners of his mouth curved faintly in a private smile, as if he already knew she would like the answer. As the car pulled away from the cafe, Brianna glanced out the window. The street seemed emptier now, the storm having driven most people indoors. And yet the unease lingered in her chest. Michael wasn't the type to give up. He never did. Luke seemed to notice her glance. "You think he's following?" I don't know. Maybe," she admitted. He nodded, his hands steady on the wheel. "Then let's make sure he can't." You won't have to worry about him anymore. Not tonight. There was something intoxicating in his confidence, in the quiet dominance he exuded without trying. Brianna's pulse accelerated, not from fear, but from proximity. Her senses were heightened, every small gesture he made amplified in her awareness. The brush of his hand as he adjusted the rear-view mirror. The tilt of his head as he watched the road. Even the subtle scent of his cologne seemed to anchor her. She realized she was staring, and quickly looked away. I'm sorry. I'm being weird. Not weird, he said calmly. Attentive. Observant. Necessary. The words made her laugh softly, tension easing slightly from her shoulders. As they drove, Luke finally broke the silence with a question that caught her off guard. So, Brianna, tell me about your work. What do you do when you're not being chased through the city? Brianna hesitated, surprised that he wanted normal conversation amidst chaos. I'm a graphic designer, she said finally, her voice steadier. I work for a small agency downtown. Mostly branding and campaigns. It's fulfilling, I guess. Luke nodded, listening intently. Creative work. That explains a lot about how you handle crises. You think outside the box. I like that. She blushed, and this time, she didn't look away. The compliment felt genuine, not condescending. For the first time in months, she felt seen. The car took an unexpected turn, weaving away from familiar streets. She looked up, uncertain. Where? You'll see, he said, cryptic, but with a calm assurance that made her heart race in both excitement and trepidation. Minutes later, they arrived at a discreet building tucked away from the main street. The entrance was sleek, secure, and elegant, far from any place a casual observer would notice. Luke stepped out first, gesturing for her to follow. Inside, the warmth hit her immediately, subtle lighting, soft music, and the faint aroma of rich coffee and polished wood. A small team of people greeted Luke by name, nodding respectfully as he passed. Brianna felt her mouth go dry. Is this a hotel? She whispered. Luke's eyes sparkled faintly. Better. Temporary sanctuary. Safe. Private. No one can find you here unless I allow it. Her jaw dropped. The man she had impulsively jumped onto was, well, wealthy. More than she could have imagined. Not the flashy, show-off type, but someone who commanded respect and power effortlessly. Luke noticed her reaction and chuckled softly. Impressive, yes. But the most important part, this is secure. You can breathe. Brianna nodded, feeling the tension in her shoulders start to melt. For the first time since the ex, she felt relief. Real relief. You'll stay here tonight, he continued, and we'll figure out next steps in the morning. No pressure, no obligations. Just safety. She wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage herself, but the fatigue in her body and the adrenaline still coursing through her veins made her voice betray her. Thank you, she whispered. Really, thank you. Luke smiled, a rare softness touching his features. You're welcome. I mean it. For a long moment, they simply stood there, two strangers thrown together by circumstance, yet an unspoken understanding forming between them. Brianna felt something she hadn't felt in months. Trust. Do you want something to eat? He asked casually, breaking the intensity of the moment. It's been a long night. She hesitated. Pride warred with practicality. Yes. That would be nice. He gestured toward a small, private kitchen. I'll have someone prepare something. You can relax. Relax. The word sounded foreign in her mind, but inviting. She followed him, the small sound of her heels muffled on the polished floor, every step reminding her how far she had come tonight. From panic on the rainy streets to safety in the arms of a stranger who was more than just a stranger. As she settled into a chair by the window, Luke lingered near the counter, observing, protective. She noticed the subtle gestures, placing a small throw over her chair, adjusting the blinds to block the streetlights. Every move was deliberate, caring, yet unobtrusive. She couldn't help but feel noticed, seen, protected. The door opened briefly, and a young assistant carried in a tray of food. Brianna realized she hadn't even considered her hunger until now. The smell of warm bread, fresh fruit, and something that looked like eggs comforted her. Eat, Luke instructed, tone gentle but firm. You need your strength. She paused, overwhelmed by the care and attention. Thank you. You're welcome, he said simply, returning her gaze. And for the first time, Brianna didn't doubt it. They ate in near silence, comfortable. Occasionally, Luke would make a small comment about the food, or Brianna would smile at some trivial observation. The tension between them softened, replaced by something far more complex: curiosity, attraction, and the first flicker of connection. After finishing, she leaned back, feeling exhausted but lighter. The constant fear, the panic, the feeling of being hunted, it was gone, at least for tonight. And she owed it all to him. So, she said finally, breaking the silence, you really don't mind all this? Helping me, keeping me safe? Luke tilted his head. Not at all. It's not a burden. And besides, he added with a faint smirk, you make it interesting. She laughed softly, the sound freeing some of the tension still clinging to her chest. Interesting. Yes, he said, eyes locking on hers. You're brave, unpredictable, and alive. That's rare. Her stomach fluttered. She wasn't used to compliments or attention, especially not from someone like him. And yet, she felt the truth in his words. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Rain still pattered against the windows. The city outside moved on, indifferent to their little corner of safety. And Brianna, sitting there in the warmth, realized that tonight wasn't just about escaping danger, it was about the beginning of something entirely unexpected. And as she let herself breathe, fully, for the first time in months, she knew one thing for certain: her life had just changed forever. Brianna awoke to the muted hum of the city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that reflected the soft morning sun. She blinked, momentarily disoriented, before realizing she wasn't in her apartment. Not her familiar apartment with peeling paint and the faint scent of old coffee. No, this place was different. Pristine, quiet, orderly, but not cold. Safe. And Luke was there, standing near the counter, arms folded loosely, watching her with that same protective calm that had ensnared her heart the night before. Morning, he said, voice warm but steady. Sleep okay? She rubbed the back of her neck, suddenly self-conscious. Better than I have in months. Thank you. You don't have to thank me, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I'm not going anywhere. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to focus on something mundane, the sunlight glinting off his watch, the tailored fit of his suit. Anything to keep her heart from hammering so loudly. After a brief breakfast prepared by his assistant, Brianna realized she had no choice but to face the reality of her situation. Michael wouldn't give up. And neither could she continue living in fear. Luke must have read her thoughts because he said, we should discuss next steps. Security, temporary relocation, legal options. She interrupted, raising a hand. Let's not do that yet. Can we just be normal for a few hours? He chuckled softly, leaning back against the counter. Normal. That's subjective. But yes, we can start there. Despite herself, Brianna felt a flutter of relief. She had never imagined that a stranger could offer her comfort without expectation. But Luke seemed different. Every gesture, every word, felt intentional, measured yet natural. She was learning to trust him without realizing it. By mid-morning, Luke suggested a walk to stretch their legs. Brianna agreed, noting how absurdly normal it felt to stroll side by side with a man who had literally kept her from being hunted the night before. The city had a certain post-storm clarity, the air crisp and alive. And yet, even in daylight, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A shiver ran down her spine. Luke noticed. You feel it too, don't you? She nodded, hesitant. I don't know if it's just paranoia, but I feel like he's close. Luke's jaw tightened just slightly. He is. And that's why I need you close to me for a while. No solo walks. No distractions. You're not going back into that storm alone. Her stomach knotted. She wanted independence, but part of her couldn't resist the magnetism of being near him. She could feel it, the protective aura, the unspoken command. Stay close, and nothing can touch you. Their walk took them through quieter streets, where Luke could maintain a watchful eye. Brianna noticed subtle ways he navigated, choosing paths with multiple exits, keeping her away from alleyways, scanning faces quickly. She felt simultaneously pampered and irritated, but deep down, she welcomed it. Do you always do this? She asked cautiously. Protect strangers from danger? Luke smiled faintly. Only the ones who need it, and only the ones I find compelling. Brianna's cheeks warmed. Compelling. Not beautiful, not charming. Compelling. There was a weight to that word, something that suggested he saw more than surface-level traits. He saw her. And that scared and thrilled her simultaneously. As they approached a small park, Luke suggested a bench. They sat in near silence for a while, watching the city wake up. Brianna noted the subtle tension in his posture, the way his eyes never wandered too far. She couldn't help but ask, curiosity getting the better of her. You're not just some random guy, are you? Luke glanced at her, faint amusement dancing in his eyes. Depends on what you mean by random. You know, you have resources, presence, confidence. You weren't just waiting for a stranger to fall into your lap, were you? He leaned back, studying her for a moment. Then he chuckled softly. Brianna, I don't wait for strangers to fall into my lap. But some people make you stop and notice. And I noticed you. Brianna's pulse quickened. Her usual defenses, a lifetime of independence and self-reliance, fought against the allure of his attention. And yet, she wanted to lean into it, wanted to feel safe, wanted to allow herself to be vulnerable without fear. Before she could respond, Luke's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. Brianna caught the glimmer of concern. Everything okay? She asked cautiously. Not entirely, he admitted. Looks like your ex is more persistent than we thought. But don't worry. I've anticipated it. He explained, in vague terms, a plan to ensure her safety without revealing the full scope of his wealth and influence. Brianna listened, awe mingling with apprehension. She had never imagined someone would go to such lengths for her, someone she barely knew. Over the next several hours, they navigated the city carefully. Every minor inconvenience, a pedestrian in a dark hoodie, a taxi that cut the wrong way, was an opportunity for Luke to subtly protect her, guiding her, watching for threats. Brianna noticed a strange combination of exhilaration and comfort in his presence. Every touch, every brush of his hand against hers, felt electric yet grounding. At one point, she tripped over a wet curb. Luke was instantly there, steadying her. Their hands lingered longer than necessary, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You're okay? He asked softly. Yeah, she said, heart hammering. You didn't have to prove anything to me last night, he said, voice low, eyes intense. You were brave enough already. The words lingered in her mind as they continued walking, her heartbeat a chaotic rhythm of fear, attraction, and awe. By late afternoon, Luke brought her to a temporary apartment, secure, well-stocked, and comforting without being ostentatious. He gestured for her to enter first. You can relax here, he said. No surprises. No interruptions. Just rest. Brianna nodded, taking in the space. It was cozy, warm, and unlike anywhere she had ever stayed. She felt a pang of guilt for relying on him, but also gratitude she couldn't fully express. As evening approached, Luke suggested they sit on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glimmered in the fading light, reflections dancing on the windows of nearby buildings. Brianna noticed how natural it felt to sit beside him, the space between them charged with tension and unspoken questions. "You've been running a long time," Luke said gently, breaking the silence. "Not just from him, from life." She looked at him, startled by the insight. "How do you know that?" He shrugged, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I notice things. The way you flinch at sudden movements. The way your hands tremble slightly when someone approaches from behind. You've carried fear longer than anyone should." Her throat tightened. Tears threatened. I thought I could handle it. Alone." "You don't have to," he said softly, turning toward her. "Not anymore." The intimacy of his gaze, the warmth in his voice, made her chest ache. She realized she wanted to lean into him, to let herself be protected, not as a damsel, but as a partner in this unexpected connection. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she inched closer. Their shoulders brushed. Her hand lightly grazed his. Luke didn't move away. Instead, he let their fingers linger near one another, creating a subtle but undeniable tension. Brianna swallowed. "Luke, You don't have to say anything," he said, voice low. "Actions speak louder than words." And in that charged moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Brianna understood. She was safe, yes, but more than that, she was beginning to care. To feel. To risk. The city around them faded, leaving only the two of them on that balcony. Hearts beating in tandem, unspoken words hanging in the air, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. And then, without warning, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I'm closer than you think. You can't hide forever." Brianna froze. Her pulse spiked. Luke's eyes immediately snapped to the message, sharp and calculating. "Stay here," he ordered gently but firmly. "Do not go anywhere." Brianna's stomach sank. Despite the safe apartment, the careful planning, the protective presence of Luke, danger had a way of finding her. Luke's jaw tightened. "I'll handle this. You trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes." He studied her for a long moment, then leaned slightly closer, so that their faces were inches apart. The tension between them was palpable, charged with both fear and an undeniable attraction. "Good," he whispered. "Because I'm not letting him hurt you. Not now. Not ever." Brianna felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear, relief, and something else, something dangerously thrilling. As night fell over the city, the two of them stood together on that balcony, poised between danger and desire, knowing that the coming hours would test not just their courage, but the fragile connection that had begun to bloom between them. The night had settled over the city like a velvet curtain, muted lights reflecting in the wet streets below. Inside the secure apartment, Brianna paced, her mind racing with a dozen possible scenarios. Luke had gone to deal with the immediate threat, Michael's presence somewhere in the city, but she couldn't sit still. Every creak, every faint sound in the hallway set her nerves taut. The apartment felt safe, yes, but danger had a way of seeping in no matter how carefully it was barricaded. She sank into the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. And then she heard it, the soft click of the door opening. Luke entered, removing his jacket, his expression calm but tinged with something heavier. He closed the door behind him and finally turned to her. "He's gone for now," he said. "I made sure he won't be a problem tonight." Brianna exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders in small increments. "Thank God." Luke studied her, eyes softer now. "Brianna, I want you to understand something. I didn't just help you tonight because you were in danger. I helped because I wanted to." She frowned slightly, uncertain. "Because you wanted to?" "Yes," he said, stepping closer. "You're compelling. And I felt it from the moment you jumped into my lap. That wasn't random, and neither is the feeling I have now. I want to protect you. I want to be near you." Brianna's breath hitched. His honesty was disarming, raw. It pulled at her in ways she hadn't expected. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he whispered, a gentle invitation in his voice. Just understand that you're not alone anymore. The weight of his words hit her harder than any danger Michael had ever posed. 4 months she had been running, physically, emotionally, mentally, from everything and everyone, even herself. And now, Luke was offering not just protection, but a partnership she hadn't dared imagine. After a long pause, Brianna finally asked the question that had been gnawing at her all day. Why help me like this? You don't even know me. You could have walked away. Luke's jaw tightened slightly, eyes distant for a moment. Because I do know you, Brianna. I've known you since the moment you scared the life out of me on that rainy street, and I've seen the fire in you ever since. You're not just another damsel in distress. You're intelligent, resourceful, human, real. And people like that are rare. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to protest her worth, but she couldn't. The truth in his words was undeniable. She had fought so hard to survive alone, but that fight had left her exhausted and lonely. Luke saw that exhaustion, acknowledged it, and yet didn't pity her. He moved toward the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. Handing one to her, he asked softly, "Do you want to tell me about Michael? About why this is happening?" Brianna hesitated, swallowing the lump in her throat. He's my ex. I thought I could move on, but he doesn't take no for an answer. He's obsessed. Dangerous. I thought I could handle him, but tonight, I panicked. Luke nodded slowly, listening intently, giving her space yet radiating unwavering focus. I understand. And you're not weak for that panic. You're human. And that human vulnerability is nothing to apologize for. The honesty in his voice, the warmth beneath it, made her chest ache. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not even close. She wanted to lean in, to reach for the safety he represented, yet part of her feared losing control. Brianna sank onto the couch, the glass of water shaking slightly in her hand. I don't want to rely on anyone. I've always handled things myself. And now. Her voice trailed off, eyes downcast. Now, Luke said softly, sitting beside her. You don't have to. The words settled like a blanket over her frayed nerves. She dared a glance at him. He wasn't imposing or arrogant, he was steady, a quiet anchor in her storm. And in that moment, she realized that allowing herself to be vulnerable wasn't a weakness. It was a choice. A risky, terrifying, but necessary choice. Luke's gaze softened as he reached out, brushing a loose curl from her face. You're not alone, Brianna. Not tonight. Not ever, if you don't want to be. Her chest tightened at the touch. It was gentle, but it carried the weight of promise, protection, and something more she couldn't yet name. Thank you, she whispered, voice small. You don't need to thank me, he said. Just let yourself rest. Let yourself feel safe. That's enough for now. For a long moment, they simply sat there, the quiet hum of the city outside filling the space between them. Brianna felt her heartbeat slow, the panic that had gripped her chest ebbing away. And yet, even as relief settled over her, an unease remained. Michael was still out there, still a threat. Hours later, the calm was shattered by a sudden knock at the door. Brianna jumped, heart hammering. Luke immediately moved to the door, hand hovering near the lock. Stay back, he said quietly, opening the door just enough to peer outside. It was his assistant, a young woman with quick eyes and a knowing expression. Everything's secure for tonight, she reported. No one's near the building. But there's something you should see. Luke nodded, signaling Brianna to follow him into the living area. On the secure laptop, he pulled up images, discreet security footage of Michael moving through the city, stopping just short of discovering her apartment. Brianna's stomach churned. He's smart, Luke said quietly, eyes scanning the feed. Persistent. Dangerous. But I've anticipated his moves. Brianna swallowed, her hands trembling slightly. How can you be sure? Luke glanced at her, the faintest shadow of a smile on his lips. Because I've seen people like him before. And I know how to stop them. Her pulse raced, not from fear alone, but from the realization of how much she had come to rely on him, how much she wanted him near. Later, as they settled on the couch, the city lights twinkling beyond the window, Brianna felt an overwhelming need to understand Luke. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "Not just rich or powerful, but you. What makes you, you?" Luke's eyes darkened slightly, a glimpse of vulnerability surfacing. "I've been where you are," he admitted. Not in the same way, but feeling vulnerable, hunted, alone. "I made choices that cost me, lessons I had to learn the hard way. I protect people now because I know what it feels like not to be protected." Brianna leaned back, absorbing his words. There was an honesty there, a rawness he didn't hide. And for the first time, she saw him not as a mysterious stranger, but as someone who had lived, struggled, and emerged stronger. "You're human," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Yes," he said, voice low. "And so are you. Don't forget that." The room fell silent, the weight of shared understanding hanging between them. Brianna felt a strange mix of comfort and longing. She wanted to reach out, to close the gap between them, yet fear and habit held her back. Luke noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to say anything," he said, leaning back but keeping his eyes on hers. "Just know. I'm here. Always." Her chest tightened. The thought of leaning on someone, trusting someone, was both exhilarating and terrifying. And yet, she knew she wanted to. She had no choice but to let him in, even if it meant opening herself to a world she had avoided for so long. As the night deepened, Brianna realized that the danger outside was real, but so was the connection growing inside. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Luke wasn't just a protector. He was a presence she craved, a stability she hadn't allowed herself before. And the storm brewing outside was nothing compared to the storm building between them, electric, dangerous, and impossible to resist. The hours passed, and Brianna found herself confessing small truths, stories of her childhood, her struggles with trust, the moments she had felt truly alone. Luke listened without judgment, occasionally offering a word of insight or comfort. "You've carried a lot," he said finally, voice quiet. "But that doesn't define you. It shapes you, yes, but it doesn't own you." Brianna's eyes filled with tears she hadn't realized were there. I've been so tired of running," she whispered. "So tired of feeling like nothing can protect me." Luke reached out, brushing her hand gently. "Then stop running," he said softly. "For tonight, for now. Let me be your anchor." Her breath hitched. The simple offer, safety, comfort, and connection, was more than she had hoped for. She nodded slowly, a silent agreement forming. And in that moment, Brianna understood something vital. The storm outside was nothing. The storm inside, the one that had kept her running, hiding, fearing, could be calmed, at least partially, by someone who truly saw her. Luke's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "Tomorrow, we plan," he said. "Tonight, we survive. Together." She nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope, not just for safety, but for something deeper, something neither of them could yet name but both instinctively understood. The first rays of dawn cut through the blinds, painting streaks of gold and gray across the apartment floor. Brianna sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the city beyond, heart still tight from the constant fear she had lived under. Even with Luke nearby, the adrenaline from the previous night hadn't fully ebbed. Every passing car, every distant siren reminded her that Michael was still out there. Luke had spent the night monitoring activity, moving through the apartment with quiet precision. Brianna watched him, noting the way his jaw tightened when reviewing the latest updates from his private security contacts. She had seen strength, yes, but tonight she was seeing a shadow she hadn't noticed before. The weight of responsibility, the dangerous edge that came with protecting someone she had come to care about. "He's close," Luke said finally, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "Closer than I thought." Brianna's stomach sank. "But I thought so too," he interrupted, moving closer. But this isn't a game. He's relentless. And he won't stop until he thinks he has what he wants. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Brianna's mind raced. He won't stop. He won't stop. I have nowhere to go. Luke noticed her panic, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. Breathe, he said. I've got this. I won't let him touch you. She nodded, but trust was fragile, layered over years of fear and betrayal. Still, she allowed herself to lean into him, if only slightly, seeking the anchor he offered. By mid-morning, the danger escalated. A sudden series of texts and anonymous calls suggested that Michael had discovered a temporary location Luke hadn't expected him to find. Brianna's heart raced as the realization hit. He was smarter, more persistent, and more dangerous than she had imagined. Luke moved quickly, securing the apartment further and moving Brianna to a more concealed area. This is temporary, he said, eyes sharp and calculating. We need to get you somewhere safe, permanent protection. Brianna's hands shook. I can't keep running, she said quietly. I'm exhausted. I can't. You don't have to, Luke interrupted firmly. You just have to trust me. Let me do this. Let me fight for you. Her chest tightened. Trust had always been a fragile thing for her, a luxury she couldn't afford. But Luke had already earned pieces of it, subtle moments of care that felt intentional and genuine. I do trust you, she admitted softly, though the words felt almost foreign on her tongue. Luke's eyes softened at her admission, and he brushed a strand of hair from her face. Good. Because I need you calm, clear. You're stronger than he knows, but even the strongest need backup. As the day progressed, the tension reached an almost unbearable peak. Michael had escalated his threats, sending notes that were personal, calculated, meant to unnerve her. Brianna could feel her chest tighten with every message, the familiar panic threatening to consume her. Luke, ever vigilant, remained composed, orchestrating a plan to draw Michael away from her. But his own worry was palpable, a sharp edge in his otherwise steady demeanor. Brianna realized in that moment that he cared, not in the abstract, but personally, deeply. Why are you doing all this? She asked, voice trembling. You could walk away. You could let me handle it. Luke's jaw tightened. Because I won't. Because I can't. And because you deserve more than fear and running. You deserve safety, and if I can give it to you, I will. The intensity of his gaze, the unshakable resolve, made her pulse spike. Brianna wanted to tell him how much it meant, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded, letting herself lean into his presence, even as the world outside threatened to collapse around them. Then came the moment that shattered the fragile calm, a loud crash from the side entrance. Brianna's heart leapt into her throat. Luke moved instantly, pulling her behind a reinforced wall panel, shielding her body with his own. Stay here, he whispered, voice tense, deadly calm. Through the small security cameras, Luke could see Michael, or someone very much like him, attempting to breach the building. Brianna's stomach churned, panic rising in waves. She felt frozen, powerless, and utterly exposed. Luke's hand brushed hers, grounding her. Breathe. Trust me, he whispered. The next minutes felt like hours. Every second was loaded with dread, every shadow a potential threat. Brianna felt tears prick her eyes, frustration and fear mingling into a heavy ache. She hated feeling this small, this vulnerable. And yet, Luke's presence gave her a tether she desperately clung to. Finally, security responded, and the intruder was intercepted before reaching the apartment. Brianna exhaled shakily, the adrenaline leaving her body in ragged waves. She looked at Luke, heart full of conflicting emotions, fear, relief, and something deeper, something she had been denying. You saved me, she whispered, voice trembling. I'm not done yet, he said, voice soft but unyielding. Not until you're safe. And not until I know you're okay. As the immediate danger subsided, Brianna sank into the couch, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. Luke knelt in front of her, hands on her knees, eyes intense. "Brianna, look at me," he said softly. She obeyed, heart hammering. "You're stronger than he realizes, but you don't have to be alone anymore. Not for this. Not for anything." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She wanted to speak, to tell him how much she appreciated him, how much she needed him. But the words stuck in her throat. Luke leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything. Just let yourself feel safe. That's enough for now." Her breath hitched, and she felt an ache deep in her chest, a longing for connection, for comfort, for someone who would stand beside her no matter what. Luke's presence was more than protection. It was a lifeline, an anchor she hadn't realized she needed so desperately. But the relief was short-lived. A new message flashed on her phone, one that made her stomach plummet. Michael had discovered her temporary location. Brianna's hands trembled as she showed Luke. His expression darkened instantly. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice steely. "Do not leave this room. Not for anything." Her pulse raced. The storm she had thought was over had returned, more intense and more personal. I'm scared," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "You have every right to be," he said, brushing her hand gently. "But I'll handle it. You trust me, right?" She nodded, swallowing hard. The terror that had gripped her for months bubbled to the surface, and for the first time, she allowed herself to admit she needed him, not just physically, but emotionally. Luke's jaw tightened as he moved toward the secure door. "I'm going to deal with this. Stay here. Do not follow." Brianna watched him go, heart pounding. Every second stretched unbearably, fear and longing intertwining. She hated feeling powerless, hated the idea of anyone hurting him, or her, but she couldn't leave his side. Minutes felt like lifetimes. Then came the sound of movement, voices outside, shouting, scuffling. Brianna's chest tightened, panic nearly overwhelming her. She wished she could run to him, to help, to protect. But she couldn't. Then she heard it, Luke's voice, calm but commanding, cutting through the chaos. "Step away. You have no right here. Leave her alone." There was a moment of silence. Then more shouts. Then the sound of someone being restrained, subdued. Brianna exhaled shakily, relief flooding through her. She wanted to run to him, but she waited, heart hammering, until he returned. Luke appeared in the doorway, disheveled but unhurt. His eyes softened when he saw her. "I told you to stay put," he said, though the corners of his lips betrayed a hint of a smile. I couldn't help it," she admitted, voice trembling. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "You're okay. That's what matters." As the night wore on, Brianna and Luke sat together, the weight of the day settling over them. She leaned against him, finally allowing herself to rest, to let go of the fear that had ruled her life. "You've done so much for me," she whispered. Luke tilted his head, brushing her hair from her face. "I've done what I should have done a long time ago. And I'll keep doing it, every day, if you let me." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, an understanding that what had begun as a chance encounter had grown into something undeniable. Something she couldn't, and didn't want to, ignore. Brianna closed her eyes, heart full of a mixture of gratitude, longing, and cautious hope. The danger was still out there, but for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. And in Luke's presence, she realized she never wanted to be. The morning sun filtered softly through the apartment windows, painting the room in gentle gold. Brianna sat curled on the couch, her mind a swirl of exhaustion, relief, and a fragile sense of hope. Last night had been the closest she had ever come to feeling completely unguarded, and alive. Luke sat beside her, a quiet presence, his hand brushing lightly against hers, grounding her in ways she hadn't known she needed. "I can't believe it's over, for now," Brianna said, her voice low. "Michael, he's not going to stop, is he?" Luke shook his head, eyes steady, calm, yet carrying that familiar edge of intensity she had come to trust. "He's gone for good. My team has made sure of it. You're safe." You've earned this calm. Brianna let herself exhale fully, letting the tension drain from her body. 4 months, she had been running from fear, from pain, from a past she hadn't fully processed. And now, sitting here with Luke, she realized that fear had less power than connection, than trust, than love that was as tangible as it was unexpected. Luke tilted his head, searching her face. Brianna, are you okay? Her eyes met his, full of a mix of gratitude, longing, and something else she couldn't yet name. I think so, she whispered. Because of you. The words hung in the air, fragile yet potent. Luke reached for her hand, threading their fingers together with a gentleness that belied the intensity he carried in other areas of life. You don't have to thank me, he murmured. You just have to be yourself. That's enough. Brianna felt warmth pool in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel fully seen, fully accepted. Luke wasn't just a protector, he was a partner in every sense, someone who respected her strength while offering support without judgment. Later that day, Luke suggested they step outside, to take a walk, to breathe in freedom and light after weeks of shadow and fear. Brianna hesitated at first, aware that exposure still carried risk, but Luke's steady presence emboldened her. Hand in hand, they stepped out into the city streets, the air crisp and liberating. Feels surreal, Brianna admitted, glancing at him. Like I'm dreaming. You're not, Luke said with a small, reassuring smile. This is real. And you are real. Strong, brave, beautiful. Her cheeks warmed at the words, but it wasn't vanity, it was acknowledgement. Someone had seen her struggle, her courage, and her worth. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of their steps mirroring the growing intimacy between them. Every brush of their hands, every subtle glance carried a weight of unspoken emotion, a magnetic pull that neither could resist. Stopping by a quiet park, Luke led her to a secluded bench, the sunlight filtering through leaves, casting dappled patterns on their faces. Brianna, he said, turning to face her fully. There's something I need you to know. I'm not just protecting you because I have to. I'm protecting you because I care for you. More than I ever thought possible. And I want you to know that it's not temporary. Not fleeting. I mean it. Her breath caught. Luke. I care for you too, she admitted, voice trembling with vulnerability. I've never trusted someone like this before. But with you, I feel like I can. He reached for her, cupping her face gently, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Then let's stop pretending this is just circumstance. Let's be intentional. Together. The intimacy of the moment, the tenderness, the raw honesty, overwhelmed her. Without thinking, she leaned in, their lips meeting in a slow, deliberate kiss. It was a kiss that carried months of fear, longing, and unspoken desire, but also a promise that neither of them would walk away now. Pulling back slightly, Luke rested his forehead against hers. You're incredible, he murmured. Stronger than you realize. And I want to be part of your story. Not just this chapter, but everyone that comes after. Brianna's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of relief, love, and hope. I want that too, she whispered. Every chapter, Luke. I want it all. He smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then we start now. Together. No running, no hiding. Just us. The world around them felt suspended, every fear of the past melting away in the warmth of their connection. And in that moment, Brianna realized that she had found not just safety, but a partner who saw her entirely, flaws and strengths alike, and still chose her. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow of danger finally lifted. Michael had been permanently dealt with, and Brianna began to rebuild her life without fear looming over her. Luke remained a constant presence, supportive, protective, loving, but never overbearing. One evening, they returned to the park where they had shared that pivotal kiss. Luke held Brianna's hands in his gaze serious yet tender. There's one more thing I want to do, he said. Her heart raced with anticipation. What is it? Luke reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, elegantly simple ring. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just beautiful in its understated honesty. He knelt before her, sunlight catching the metal. "Brianna Williams," he began, voice steady, full of emotion, "you've changed my life. You've shown me what it means to trust, to love fully, without fear. I want to be by your side, in every moment, for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?" Brianna's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely. The depth of her feelings, the months of fear and longing, culminated in this one undeniable truth. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted forever. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. "Yes, Luke. 1,000 times yes." Luke's face lit with joy, and he slipped the ring onto her finger, sliding up to embrace her. Their kiss this time was fierce, passionate, filled with the intensity of everything they had endured and everything they now had: trust, love, and shared vulnerability. That night, in the quiet of the apartment, they allowed themselves to fully revel in the closeness they had forged. Luke traced patterns along Brianna's skin, each touch a silent promise. Brianna rested against him, her heart finally free from the chains of fear and pain. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she whispered, voice soft, eyes closed. Luke kissed her temple, holding her tightly. "You deserve it. We both do." And in that embrace, the past finally released its grip. The fear, the running, the panic. It all became part of the story that had led them here, to a love that was fully realized, fully earned, and fully theirs. Weeks later, friends and family gathered for a modest but beautiful celebration of their engagement. There were smiles, laughter, and a sense of warmth that Brianna had almost forgotten existed. Luke's family embraced her with kindness, and her own family marveled at the transformation they saw in her, confident, radiant, and fully alive. As the evening wore on, Luke and Brianna found themselves alone on a balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before them. "I can't believe this is real," Brianna said, leaning into him. "It is," Luke replied, holding her close. "And it will be. Every day, every challenge, every joy, we face it together. No running, no fear, just us." Brianna closed her eyes, letting the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. "I never thought I could feel this, safe, and this loved. But I do. With you." Luke kissed the top of her head, whispering, "And I love you. Every part of you, every day." She smiled, the kind of smile that reaches deep into the soul, filled with hope, love, and certainty. "I love you too, Luke. Always." The night stretched around them, quiet and serene, yet alive with possibility. They didn't need grand gestures or proclamations beyond their words and their presence. The months of fear, danger, and uncertainty had given way to something stronger: trust, partnership, and a love that neither could imagine living without. And as they stood together, hands intertwined, hearts beating in sync, Brianna realized that she had found more than a protector. She had found a soulmate. The storm had passed, leaving only clarity, hope, and the unshakable knowledge that love, true, deep, unwavering love, was worth every risk, every moment of fear, and every heartbeat they had shared along the way. For Brianna and Luke, the future was no longer uncertain. It was theirs, bright, fearless, and fully alive.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.